Hello and welcome to chapter 13 of our exploration through Wuthering Heights. I hope you've been enjoying it so far, and if you've missed any chapters, please go back and have a listen too. We're now on to chapter 13, as I say, and don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, leave a comment, and I hope you find it useful. So, yeah, please don't forget to do that. Brilliant. Let's jump into chapter 13. So, Katherine has been ill, but there is a little bit of signs of improvement. It's been described a brain fever. Doesn't necessarily leave a lot of specifics of exactly what that is, but we know that she's been very ill, and she's also seemed to be suffering from mental health problems with it as well. Then we have Dr. Kenneth's rather doom-laden comment there, which I thought was quite amusing there. Like, Edgar Linton's trying to help her out, but really trying to help her out, it's just going to make her worse later on. Then we have the idea of Edgar thinking that she'd go back completely to how she was, but then remember that we've had Heathcliff has returned, and we've said before, just like he did when he turned up when he was a child, he's upset the kind of natural order. I think Bronte portrays it like this. Heathcliff's return marks another disruption. She's never really going to go back to how she was before with Edgar Linton. So Edgar Linton had put some golden crocuses on her pillow as an act of his devotion, and also an act of a recognition for her devotion to nature as well. Then she caught them in waking and shone delighted as she gathered them eagerly together. So she's still recovering from her illness, but a glimpse of nature in Katherine's character gives her kind of energy, a bit of energy, and revitalises her. So there's references to nature as well, huge theme of the novel, and we've got that continuing motif, and it's very much linked to Katherine's soul as a character as well. Bronte always has that. Then next spring you'll long again to have me under this roof, and you'll look back and think you were happy today. So this really again is foreshadowing. Yeah, it's not a huge surprise that she's going to die. And there's some little words just appeared in the corner there because I noticed this bit was missing. So if you were wondering what the words were down there, I haven't actually highlighted that bit. But the key thing is that in between this section here, she is taken from her bedroom now to sitting in the parlour. So she is getting better. The idea that we're getting here. Then, I thought myself she might recover, so waited on as she was, and there was double cause to desire it, for on her existence depended that of another. We cherished the hope that in a little while Mr. Linton's heart would be gladdened, and his land secured from a stranger's grip by the birth of an heir. So this is foreshadowing of two things. One is that Katherine will give birth and have her own heir, but actually this is foreshadowing as well. There is going to be another heir in the novel as well, which is Heathcliff and Isabella's child, and of course we know from previous chapters they've run away together. Then we have, it appeared dry and cold, but at the bottom was dotted in with pencil an obscure apology. This is Nelly has received a letter because Edgar Linton will not talk to Isabella after the elopement with Heathcliff. And any relic of the dead is precious if they were valued living. So see what you think about this. So we have another sub-narrator here because Nelly is reading the letter to Lockwood. So she's got this branching narrative structure really, where it branches off into these different sub-narrators as well. So we've already had some of those obscure ones, which I must admit I forgot completely about. The milkmaid and a servant, so we've had those, but this is a much bigger thing. So we've got a letter here, and it's a very detailed letter, but then it has to be really, because Bronte is using this. It allows her to tell us things that Nelly didn't see, because Nelly was working at Thrushcross Grange at the time. She wasn't living at Wuthering Heights. So it gives us a window into Isabella's experience as well. It still has similar connotations of reliability. How reliable is Isabella? You can decide that yourself. I think she's explaining things at face value pretty much. That's my impression of it, but you can have your own impression of it. So she wants to get in touch with Edgar. She wants my heart returned to Thrushcross Grange in 24 hours after I left it. So she's already very quickly experienced remorse at running away with Heathcliff. What she was really thinking, who knows? But really, let's not blame Isabella, because Heathcliff has taken advantage of her affection for him, and she's young and naive. She's not so naive anymore. I think she's a much tougher character than she actually appears. What she goes through, another theme of the novel, isn't it, is how your experiences, particularly in childhood, shape you. I know Isabella is older, but her experiences at Wuthering Heights and with Heathcliff, they alter how she responds to other things. So we have how did you contrive to preserve the common sympathies of human nature when you resided here? So that's is surprised at how awful life is at Wuthering Heights. How could you have any favourable views towards the rest of humanity when it's such an awful, awful place? This is really good. A succession here of rhetorical interrogatives. Is Mr. Heathcliff a man? If so, is he mad? And if not, is he a devil? Again, that's another recurring motif, isn't it? Of inhumanity and also of devils and of hell. What have I married? So in this era, bit of context really, there's not an easy way for particularly a woman. It's actually even hard for men to get divorced in that era. But it's virtually impossible. I think it is. Yeah, it's yeah. I think in that era when it's set, definitely impossible for women to get divorced. It did. There were some kind of loopholes a bit later on, but the law always favoured men anyway. And to get divorced, you have to have an act of parliament and loads of money, and you'd have to know an MP who would actually have to bring up your divorce in parliament to get it to happen. So it's just not a thing that most people could do. Heathcliff probably could afford it actually, but he wouldn't be well connected enough to get that to happen. But I don't think he really wants a divorce, because obviously it's a way of exerting power over Isabella and therefore by extension the Lintons as well. So we had Joseph, again, we know how miserable he is. He did it with a courtesy that redounded to his credit. His first act was to elevate his torch to a level with my face, squint malignantly, project his underlip and turn away. That's typical Joseph friendliness. I thought I'd highlight that, and I mean that sarcastically, of course. We also have a reference here to Hareton, who we'd seen before, and he's being really kind of neglected as he's being brought up. Hindley is still alive. He's still deteriorating. He's drinking. He's gambling. He's violent. His mental health is deteriorating. And you have Hareton, who's growing up to be like a very kind of wild, uncontrollable, sweary little boy as well. But here he's described as a ruffianly child, strong in limb and dirty in garb, with a look of Katherine in his eyes and about his mouth. So he's got the family resemblance there as well. He replied in a jargon I did not comprehend. It's either very strong local dialect, or it's could be swearing, and perhaps Isabella may not want to write the swearing. That's a possibility. An oath, that's a swearing, isn't it? And a threat to set Throttler on me if I did not frame off rewarded my perseverance. So little Hareton's got the dog with him, and he's Throttler, great name for a dog, isn't it? He's going to set it on her because he's not happy. So this is all very kind of unwelcome greeting again at Wuthering Heights. It actually echoes Lockwood's arrival right at the start as well, doesn't it, when we think about it? Hindley himself, his features were lost in masses of shaggy hair that hung on his shoulders, and his eyes too were like a ghostly Catherine's, with all their beauty annihilated. So that's Hindley. He's really deteriorating. They're not expecting Isabella to be turning up here. This is where this confusion comes in. I would have gone in. Your little boy played sentinel all over the place and frightened me off by the help of a bulldog. It's well the hellish villain has kept his words, growled my future host. So he doesn't realise what's going on. She's married to Heathcliff. So we have more of the hellish imagery. We have a great fire in Wuthering Heights itself. We know what it's like. We know that kind of atmosphere. But it's even further declined. It's dusty. It's dark. It's untidy. It's unclean. And this is quite a nice reference here, remembering that 4 miles distant lay my delightful home, containing the only people I loved on earth, and there might as well be the Atlantic to part us instead of those 4 miles. So this is an analogy Bronte's using here. Theme of isolation as well. Isabella is completely isolated at Wuthering Heights. She might as well be in America. She can't get any closer. She's only 4 miles away from her old home, and she just can't get back to it. It's impossible. So let's go on to the next page. And we have this weird little sequence here where you have Hindley. He shows off his gun to Isabella, but don't worry, don't complain to YouTube about sounds, because it's actually his real pistol. And it's quite an interesting pistol, because you remember Lockwood described there are lots of old, sundry villainous guns, I think is the quotation, isn't it? Lots of old weapons. It adds to the sense of threat about Wuthering Heights itself. And Hindley has resurrected one of these old pistols, but it's one with a double-edged spring knife attached to the barrel, which sounds a little bit kind of James Bond or maybe a bit of Pirates of the Caribbean type feel to it. But he's got this gun and he's carrying it around with him all the time. And remember, Nelly had taken bullets out of one of the guns earlier on in the novel as well, in fear of her own safety before she left Wuthering Heights. Hindley, I cannot resist going up with this every night and trying his door. If once I find it open, he's done for. So Hindley is actually hoping to have an opportunity to kill Heathcliff with his gun. Then Isabella actually looks at the gun. She has a look at it. He actually lets her have a look at the gun. I surveyed the weapon inquisitively. A hideous notion struck me, how powerful I should be possessing such an instrument. I took it from his hand and touched the blade. He looked astonished at the expression my face assumed during a brief second. It was not horror, it was covetousness, which means this is a really interesting line for Isabella's character, because I think she's often depicted, and maybe your first impressions of her is weak, but also the atmosphere of Wuthering Heights, her experiences with Heathcliff, she actually wants this gun. She is thrilled at the idea of the power it would give her potentially to stand up to Heathcliff. It must be, mustn't it? So it's a real fascinating moment in her character there, and I think it shows real steel in her character. There's a lot of strength in Isabella, which we will see more of, but she's not as weak as she seemed when we first encountered her, when they were fighting over that puppy and looking really pathetic when they were children. So he snatches it back jealously himself, because you can see that Isabella is interested in the allure of the gun. So then we have at the bottom, I'm going to have to move this because I can't really see it. There we go. Then we have, no, thundered Earnshaw, should he offer to leave me, he's a dead man. Persuade him to attempt it and you are a murderess. Am I to lose all without a chance of retrieval? So you might think Hindley wants Heathcliff out of there. No, he doesn't. He wants him to stay, because he wants to get back that he's lost. So he's lost loads of money. I will have it back, and I'll have his gold too, and then his blood, and hell shall have his soul. So I quite like there's incrementum there as a technique, that sense of build-up. So he wants all his money back, then he wants to kill him, then he's going to go to hell, Heathcliff will. So he's clearly on the verge of madness. So we said about the deterioration, and again, it's how the experiences have shaped the character. And living at Wuthering Heights, you couldn't write this in a bit of writing, but it's like a toxic environment, isn't it, really? And it creates these awful people. It brings out the worst in people. We've had a glimmer of that, even with Isabella there as well. She's not used to this kind of life where she's normally served and waited upon. I'll make the porridge. She has to actually do things for herself, and she actually messes up making the porridge as well. The other bit we have, Joseph beheld my style of cookery with growing indignation. There, he ejaculated. Again, don't get the wrong ideas, YouTube. It's in its Victorian sense of the word for a sudden outburst. We have covered this before. Then she's also horrified by, there's a complete lack of civility, and in this case actually hygiene as well, because Hareton, they get some milk in for the porridge, and Hareton just has a big swig out of the massive jug, and she's then worried about the hygiene, and that's just the Wuthering Heights way, just put up with it all. So she's deliberately contrasting with her environment. She's incongruous to the environment that she now finds herself in. And this is still her letter. It's all coming from her. Meanwhile, the infant ruffian continued sucking and glowered up at me defiantly, and he slavered into the jug. So, yeah, you wouldn't really want to share a jug of milk with him, would you, really? So none of the refinements that she's used to here. Look, parlour, he echoes sneeringly, parlour. No, we've no parlours. You can hear the mockery there with the italics. The idea of this huge contrast between the world of Thrushcross Grange and the world of Wuthering Heights. Completely different. Wuthering Heights, really unrefined, almost kind of medieval in many ways, like less civilized. Then there's continuous theme of trying to find somewhere to settle down and make herself some kind of decent life there. She hasn't really got anywhere to stay. No one's showed her to a room. No one said this is where you're going to sleep. So she's not used to this kind of level of hostility. She ends up getting Joseph to persuade her of somewhere, to show her somewhere where she can go, and it's just this old rubbish storeroom. So again, that deliberate incongruity, that deliberate idea that she's not part of this world at all. Why, man, I exclaimed, facing him angrily. This is not a place to sleep in. I wish to see my bedroom. Bedroom? He repeated in a tone of mockery. Yes, see all to bedrooms there is. Yon's mine. So his room's there as well. So she's got nowhere to stay. She thinks she'll be with Heathcliff in his room, but it's not actually going to be that. This reference here, sometimes people like to say, well, it might affect you as a reader. It gives Wuthering Heights connotations of prison, but actually in real life, when Bronte was writing, inmates hadn't picked up any meaning associated with prison at all. But it doesn't stop you from making that as a point, because it's a good point potentially. But you could always have your cake and eat it and mention both, couldn't you? Then you have, he made no reply to this adjuration, only plodding doggedly down the wooden steps and halted before an apartment. So, finding all these different rooms, a handsome oak bedstead with ample crimson curtains of rather expensive material and modern make, but they had experienced rough usage. Rough usage, turning to Scooby-Doo, sorry. But the house is completely wrecked. Sorry, the room is completely wrecked. This is where Hindley has actually been before. And poor Isabella gets so angry, I was so vexed, I flung my tray and its contents on the ground. So she hurls her porridge all over the place. Weird line here, wheel done, Miss Cathy, wheel done, Miss Cathy. Presumably, well, there's two ways of looking at this. This is either sarcasm, because he has been very mocking of Isabella. So he's mocking her, saying her behaviour is, really very similar to young Cathy. And then also possibly it could be because he's senile and he's making a mistake and he's having a flashback to the kind of emotional outburst that young Katherine would have as well. Could be a bit of both, but you can decide on that one. Then this is deliberately ironic as well. Bronte uses this. Mr. Heathcliff awoke me. He'd just come in and demanded in his loving manner, what was I doing there? It won't be loving. Oh, and I should have said before that she ends up sleeping in Hareton's room. She finds a chair to sleep in there. Then with Heathcliff, this is a great line, her attitude to Heathcliff. Yet I assure you, a tiger or a venomous serpent could not rouse terror in me equal to that which he wakens. So more natural and predatory imagery in its description of Heathcliff as well there from Bronte. Promising that I should be Edgar's proxy in suffering till he could get hold of him. So he's effectively going to effectively torture her, really, like physically, mentally, because he hates the Lintons so much, and she's effectively being a punch bag for him. So I do hate him. I am wretched. I have been a fool. So I just realised there, and I accidentally just went to the next chapter, a sneak preview of the next one. So we will stop there. So that wasn't that long a chapter, actually. So I hope you enjoyed that. You found it useful. Like, comment, subscribe, leave a comment. Listen and watch to my other videos. It's all there to help you. So I hope it has been of help. Have a great day or night, whatever you're doing. And I will see you on the next one. Goodbye. She actually has matured as